Webcam microphone up close.
Webcam microphone up close.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was a...
See, but I have the files. You know, I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, you know, pistols and fondle slab of choice. I don't know when that was. It doesn't really matter. Internet, professional wrestlers, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the information comes from as long as it's real. It doesn't. It's hard to get real information because seriously, they don't want you to just read two sources whenever I try to prove out. You know, it's not. If you expect your government to tell you the truth, you're going to be sadly disappointed on another one of these things.
Dear Lord, what a dirty, dirty old man, huh?
Really? You can't be serious. Is this really how you want things to be? Come on. More hooker, eruptions? Eruptions, whatever.
Like Dave Powers kind of...
Really?
Allegedly broadcast live from Pima Region 2. Within the borders of the formerly united and currently occupied states of America, we bring you the Ochelli Effect.
It's like, damn sure, no, I'm an original.
We have all these situations. I'd love to know why it takes 50 years, for
that.
For a 19-year-old girl to eventually get up to gumption to put these things out.
Holy. Man, oh man. Good evening, UCY.TV radio. The Ochelli Effect finally got itself on. Skype. Gotta love it, baby. Oofa. Now, let's see. Here we go. Alright then. Now, hopefully you guys are hearing me. Somebody hit me up on the Skype and let me know that I'm on, because I'm telling you now, I'm getting mixed signals over here. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Alright, well look, I'm just going to move on as if I am on, and hopefully I'm right. Bottom line is this. Thank you, George. Thank you, sir. Okay, now, bottom line here is that tonight I am going to do a show on addiction, and of course I'm going to have Mr. Daniel Lewis Crumpton back on, and I had him on earlier. He's an author for zeninthecar.com. He does columns over there. He also wrote a very interesting book, which I've only gotten to read the excerpts of thus far. I do apologize for the technical problem at the very beginning there, but I'm sitting here waiting to go on, and a couple of minutes deep, when I'm sitting there waiting to make the call into UCY, I try and do that, and the sucker just dropped and then folded up my Skype on me, and I had to restart everything. So again, I do apologize. But let's see. All right. Good deal. Okay, so it looks like Mr. Crumpton is just about ready, and of course everybody who has been sending me emails and things like that, I appreciate it. Anybody who doesn't know, the email address is chuck1972 @ lycos.com. That is my general sort of email box. I've had it, for, I don't know, nearly 20 years, I guess. 17 years, something like that. I think I started that sucker in 97. Yeah, there was an internet in 1997. A lot of things have changed. I'll tell you, last night was interesting too, because while I'm getting ready to drop everything together here and actually put together what I wanted to do, last night I actually spent about 6 hours going on other radio networks trying to spread the word about UCY and the Ochelli effect, and I always do that kind of thing intermittently. And I just want to say that some places are more friendly than others, and we shall see about a pre-recorded interview. If it drops, it ought to be interesting, and at least we'll get the word spread onto Sirius and XM if that actually happens. However, I did also spend a little bit of time with my friends on, Lee Peer and Dennis Ford, who do quite a few shows, but they were doing a roundtable thing, and then I ended up on them with them again and all that. So those guys are awesome, and Lee, we're glad to have you back, sir. I just wanted to say that. It's a personal little thing, but what can you do? Also, on other notes, let's see. That the MP3 for Thursday's show did wind up getting dropped. I guess there was a little delay on that. Usually there isn't. UCY is really actually excellent with all that stuff. It is up on YouTube and everything else, in case you missed it. Also, I participated in Vince's show, which he said was his last broadcast. We shall see what the future holds for Vince. And, of course, he mentioned on there quite a few things about the exciting up-and-coming stuff for UCY. Now, back to the subject at hand. As I said before, I'm going to bring in Daniel Lewis Crumpton, who you heard on here before. We were discussing spirituality, the history of religion, the Christian faith versus the organized church, etc., etc., and of course his wonderful novelization where he sort of created an interesting cross blend of a lot of this stuff. Very spiritual guy, and somebody that I count as a new friend. But when we started to talk about this during the Liberty Beacon night on Tuesday, there was some discussion, of course, about Robin Williams, which led to the discussion about drugs and led to the discussion about mental illness, the brain, the exact chemistry with which many people find themselves confined. And this is an entirely different reality than what a lot of you thankfully are aware of, because there is something very different about being involved, immersed, stuck in a world where your brain chemistry has been altered, whether you initiated it or it was given to you by a doctor or whatever else. It does create a completely different mindset. It creates a different psychology. It creates a different physiology. There are a lot of different aspects to addiction itself, and what I hear a lot, especially among people in the freedom, liberty, whatever it is you want to call it, the truther type people, I almost want to vomit when I say that, because most of the so-called truther movement is not really interested in the truth. They're interested in a prefabricated agenda, very much like those in the mainstream are. Of course, those in the mainstream don't write their own scripts. These guys do, and it's usually based on a personal bias, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And trying to discuss facts or realities with certain people, all of a sudden everything in the world is fictitious. All of a sudden, everything in the world has been fabricated and made up, and regardless of what your conclusions were, they don't make any sense, and that leaves plenty of room to the imagination and to the creative writers of the world, and things like that. And this is not what we should be preoccupied with, the arguments between, our own sort of interpretations of what we believe reality should be. We should be looking for the proper evidence when it regards the major events. And this is what I've always argued with people about is and I've gotten myself in a lot of trouble too. A lot of trouble. People wondered why I worked on other people's projects when it came to deep political research. And no, I'm not going to launch into a thing about JFK. Relax, everybody. We're not going to do that tonight. But, I also worked on the King assassination. I worked on, MK Ultra stuff. I worked on a bunch of, cult related studies, other sorts of mind control studies. Some of these things were published. Some of these things ended up in documentaries. I used to have somebody really, really close to me who would laugh because they started to recognize that I somehow take on a particular smirk when it's something that I knew directly about. I guess it looks like, because I've never caught it myself, but they seem to know about it, and they would always point it out whenever I was watching a documentary, looking at a book, reading a news article, something like that. I always knew when the genesis of what I was looking at, regardless of whether it had been completely manipulated and warped into something else or not. In a lot of cases, this was something that I always knew when the genesis had something to do with me, Anyway, where was I getting myself in trouble last night and having problems? Well, it's because I have particularly different sympathies about this whole situation in Missouri right now. I have a different perspective on it. Part of that is because, I could tell you a story about a place in New York City where a mayor who will remain nameless, because I just don't even want to utter the guy's name on my air, turned around and turned out the homeless people from the many, many places where they were and absolutely took away their ability to have a safe haven to be. They, sort of congregated into an area. And then when they were approached by mass police, because, you didn't need the riot gear and the surplus military hardware that we see nowadays in order to create groups of guys that were willing to go in there and bust heads and move crowds around, all of that. Oh, Mr. Crumpton is with me. That's what that little bit of an echo is. But let me just finish this thought really quickly, and then I'll kick off what I was doing with Daniel tonight. The thing is this. They didn't require all that. All they needed was the massing of the force, a couple of guys on horseback, and a few paddy wagons. And the next thing you know, there was a bunch of homeless guys getting beat down. And then if you look really, really closely at some of that film, you might find somewhere in the background an idiot in a Sex Pistols. There's my trip on my tongue. An idiot in a Sex Pistols t-shirt with the sleeves cut off and long hair, which is kind of strange looking to begin with, getting roughed up by some cops and then cuffed to an iron post. Thank you very much. And if it wasn't for a friend of mine who worked for the Village Voice, I probably would have went to jail had they not already been rounding up tons and tons of people who had nowhere else to go. So, and the only crime I had committed really was going down there to see what had happened and to begin to say something to the authority that was right there in my reach. But so I have a slightly different idea of what it's about that's going on over there in Ferguson. And I don't give a damn about the color of the people involved. Let's make that extremely clear. I don't care about the color of whoever got their dog shot, of the people that have had their eyes sprayed out by the mace, the people that have been roughed up, the people that have been shot at, the people who have had flashbang grenades thrown into their babies' cribs. I don't care what color they are. My concern is the amount of red which is spilling on the ground everywhere, and it needs to stop. And that is my position. End of story. apparently this is not something that is favorable with everyone. But I don't really care. Now, to get into the meat of what we're going to do tonight, I started to talk, like I said, on Tuesday night, and in brief again about a bunch of things. Of course, it began with a discussion about Robin Williams, which I really don't even want to touch upon anymore because, quite honestly, I think that it's all being overplayed, played out, and twisted and manipulated, just like every other story in the mainstream. And I think the alternative media has been just as irresponsible about it because I keep asking this question: where are your facts regarding these suppositions? And guess what? Nobody has them. Very little is really known about the entire situation, and I ask you to reserve judgment, and that's what I'm going to do anyway. And you know what? If you don't want to, fine, bandy about your crap and enjoy it. But this is not what I'm going to do. Okay, this is where that discussion started, but we wound up going into the brain chemistry, the psychology, and a couple of other things about addiction. And quite honestly, this is something which has played a role in my own life, and whether you realize it or not, I guarantee you it has played a role in the lives of just about anybody who's listening to me right now. And this is a relatable subject. This is a human subject, and I'm leaving judgments aside, and I hope my listeners are too, because what we're going to do is talk about what this really means, what the real effects are, and where it's at. And meanwhile, a seriously spiritual, intelligent guy who is clean at the moment, and I know that for sure because we had a conversation, but also has the great clarity to discuss just about anything, it seems. So I wanted to make sure that Mr. Crumpton came on to walk through this process with me and actually share a little bit, because maybe, just maybe, we'll reach one person that needs to hear a story like this. And you know what? There may be more than one story on this broadcast. So how you doing tonight, Danny?
I'm doing excellent, Chuck. It's nice to be on with you again. Greetings and salutations. And by the way, Skype does not have any problems. It just takes quiet meditations before deep contemplations. Yeah, well, I had to actually restart everything, and we had a couple of minutes of dead air at the top of the broadcast, which I absolutely despise, and I apologize for, but we are finally on, and thank all the powers in the universe that we can communicate tonight and possibly do some good here, Daniel. I think so. I think together our voices might reach at least one person, probably more. I do want to, before we do get into the meat of it, there are a few things I do want to say. And I don't want to sound like a televangelist, but I know that there are people, at least one person, who's going to be listening tonight who's either struggling with addiction or they know someone struggling with addiction. And before we even get started, I want to encourage them to go get something to write with, because either that or open up Notepad and take notes to any references we happen to make tonight. I know when I do my research and I listen to things like this, I'll try to make a mental note of books or websites or videos, and then later on I'll forget. So I would urge anybody who's listening tonight for a way out or further insight into this topic to make sure that you make notations as we go. Also, I want to preface it by saying that as I speak about this subject, I'll quote the Buddha. I cannot tell you how to become enlightened. I can only tell you how I became enlightened. And that's the same thing with addiction and sobriety. I don't believe that there's any system that you can follow necessarily step by step. I believe that it's like chicken and rice. Look, if I say something and it helps you, put it into your regiment. If something isn't working, then don't, discard it. Create your own road to recovery, your own path to recovery. I hope that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense to me, Daniel, and is a perfect example of why you are one of the most eloquent and salient individuals I've ever had on the show. So I really appreciate your time, and yeah, we're gonna go down more than one road here, and if any of this provides the beginnings of even the very opening step in someone else's mind who needs the help, it'll be certainly worth, boring those of you or whatever else who don't think this involves you. But I say again, if you think that you have never been touched by this subject, I guarantee you're wrong.
Yeah, that's one of the misnomers of addiction. Everybody, and we tend to think of the term addiction with alcohol and hard drugs, but there are several other addictions too. But I would preface by saying, this is going to be I hope that you understand whenever you ask me to come on, I was not going to approach this subject in an orthodox way. And, as far as the Robin Williams issue is what really opened this up for us. And I know that there are some other details coming out about his death, and that's neither here nor there, because at least it opened up this conversation for us. The good news is that according to his wife, he was, his sobriety was maintained. Now that's the silver lining in the cloud, that some people think of drug addiction and relapse, and it's an endless cycle, and look, he even went 20 years, and then he fell off the wagon. But if what she says is true, which there's no reason to doubt what she has to say, then there's hope, because he did maintain his sobriety, and his death was perhaps caused by other things. So, but Robin Williams really isn't the topic tonight. It's more on the issue of addiction and things of that nature. And one of the main reasons that I decided to come on was we had a caller last time that couldn't really see through the eyes of somebody who is an addict or an alcoholic. And there are a lot of people out there like that. And, I'm not bashing the caller. He has every right to his opinion. But it compelled me to want to discuss this because it's easy for one addict to be able to relate to another addict without words. We know the feeling. We know what it's like, to be in that place. And people who are not genetically predisposed to substance abuse have a hard time connecting with the thought processes and the actions of somebody who's in that cycle of addiction. Like I said the other night, when I'm open about my life, I'm an open book. I believe a man with no secrets is invincible. Nothing can come back and bite him later. So it doesn't bother me to talk about these types of things because, like you said, if it helps one person, then it was worth me going through the struggle in order to be able to speak to it. Does that make sense?
Well, it makes perfect sense to me, and, I have been reticent to discuss this subject as well, but it was sort of like you said, after listening to someone make those sort of old school judgments about, somebody else being weak, and that's pretty much, what causes this. This is a decision. This is this. This is that. They're making a lot of judgments without ever having really having to endure what the actual damage is here from a lot of different sources. It's not just the genetic predisposition. There are other factors involved here. And I'm going to make an admission right now, which I really wasn't going to, but in all honesty, I wound up hooked on painkillers for just about a decade at one point, and it started as a medical need. As I speak to you right now, I have none of them in my system. I am free of that particular hold that was on me for quite a long time, and the idea in some people's minds is, look, if it's killing you, just stop. All of that, and this is an oversimplification of what the real problem is. Well, and I think that this is one of the important things that we need to get across, is that when people make these sort of flippant statements about individuals who are in certain positions, first of all, you don't know exactly how they got there. You're making judgments without all of the information. And that's why I also said something about every situation, is that in reality, if you don't fully understand how is it that you can pass judgment? And in my mind, it is very difficult for one man to judge another man in any way, shape, or form, regardless of how inflammatory the topic is. But that's yet another story.
Well, and I think here's a case in point, Chuck. As you said earlier, I'm aware of it myself, and a lot of people are aware of it. That I'm a fairly intelligent person. That's not being arrogant. It's not arrogant to be aware of your gifts and your talents. I'm a Virgo, so that means Quicksilver. I think very, very quickly. I'm very, very, I think fast and I think far, and that's just my gift. So I play to that gift. But like you said, I'm well-spoken, you're well-spoken, we're both very, very intelligent people. However, we, with our, ability to think ourselves out of situations, still ended up in a cycle of addiction. So it cannot be an issue of decision-making, which is made in that place. Mm-hmm. There has to be other factors. And one of the things I really want to start off with is something that may seem a little unorthodox, but I want to talk about numerology, believe it or not, in regards to addiction. And I'll try to be brief with it, but anybody who happened to go get something to write with and a pen, I would encourage you to actually draw this out as we go. Addiction is a villain. You have to think of it as a villain. It's the ego. It's a part of you that is like your darker half. This side of you, this Jekyll and Hyde issue. But with numerology, and there's one particular number that I really want to focus on tonight, as long as you know what the esoteric meanings of 0 through 10 are, you can kind of see where you're at in your life. For example, in numerology, and I'm going to be very broad with this, so just do your own research into it, 0 would represent God, or the pleroma, as we call it. And then from God, you have 1, which would represent atom, or the atom. From God comes life. And then from the first life, you have 2, which is Eve, new life. And then together, 1 and 2 create 3, which is their son, Cain. And from 3, you have 4. Now, 4 in Buddhism and Hinduism, when you study numerology, represents the fourfold nature of man. Man has 4 bodies: the intellectual body, the physical body, the spiritual body, and the intelligent body. In dealing with addiction, treatments tend to focus on one of those 4. If you go to, say, something like Reformers Anonymous, which is a Christian-based rehab facility, they focus on the spiritual. But they totally leave out the emotional, the intelligent, and the physical. If you go to AA, perhaps, they'll focus on the emotional and leave out the other. Do you see what I'm saying? They cut up how they treat it or how they look at it. But as far as I go, for recovery, you have to balance all 4. You have to balance the emotional body, the physical body, the spiritual body, and the intelligent body. Are you following me so far?
Oh, I'm with you. The fact is, we're dealing with a multifaceted problem. This is not simply a problem of the mind. This is not simply a problem of the emotions or the heart. This is not simply a problem of the body. This is not a problem of just the spirit. In fact, it is rather insidious because it will take hold on all 4 of these aspects. Now, I said it slightly differently than you, and my numerology works a little bit differently, but I have a feeling that it's all going to coalesce into just about the same thing by the time we're done here. So,
yeah, probably so. We're just the same thoughts, different words.
You got it.
But in numerology, if you can balance the fourfold nature, then you go to 5. 5 represents the mastery of man. You have 5 limbs. You're a star standing upright, which means to return to divinity. If you can get to 5, then you get to 6, which is a turning around of lower consciousness. And then you have 7, the number of divine intervention. That's when the divine comes and gets you out of this situation, but showed forth the effort. That intervention. 8 is the number of expansion. Sideways, it's infinity. That's when you expand as a human being. And then you get to 9, which is a 1 turning back on itself, which is life going back towards divinity or creation. And then you have 10, which is, it's a cycle. It's a circle, the alpha and the omega. From 0 comes 1, then at the end of it, 1 goes back into 0. It's the cycle of man. There's a book by Joseph Campbell called Hero's Journey that talks about all of us are on this, we're on a story of sorts. And you guys know, I know you know, Chuck, that I use a lot of movie references because I believe movies are the parables of today. It's the mythology of tomorrow, probably the religions of tomorrow. And George Lucas's Star Wars is an excellent example because he tells you that he based the entire series off of the hero's journey.
Well, yes, he did, and you just faded out on the Skype a little bit there. But the interesting part here is that not only does it speak to the storyline in the hero's journey, but it also relates quite well to many religious cycles and actually the narratives which are contained in a lot of the religions from time immemorial. Even when you talked about the number 5 there and being the number of man, you know, this is not the insidious aspect that is often given to the pentacle in pagan belief systems. Actually, the pentacle is the symbol of man, and a lot of people don't understand that. Now you're back, Daniel. Sorry, I did fill in there because you kind of dropped for a second, but I wanted to keep this going. So you were talking about the hero's journey and how Lucas had based it on that, and I kind of continued off of that. So, but please continue.
Right. So I want people to keep that in mind. I wanted to keep it in mind as we talk about this because especially if you are in the cycle of addiction. The reason that Hollywood and movies really, really appeal to us is because these parables are really telling us about ourselves. Most of us are looking for a hero or a savior to come and save us. I know in addiction, most people, if you've been in addiction, it's almost like you're waiting for somebody to come and save you. Does that make sense?
It certainly does to me.
Yeah, you're waiting, you cry out to God in the middle of it, and you're like, why don't you come and save me? But what we're doing is we're taking our attention off the person that really needs to be doing the saving. You know, there's a Regina Spektor song, it's called Hero, and she says in the song that she's the hero of this story. She doesn't need to be saved. And that may sound heretical to some people. It may sound blasphemous to other people, but it's the truth. And if we go to the Matrix movies, you remember the character of Kid, he cried out to Neo, you know, you saved me. And Neo said, no, I didn't. You saved yourself. I just gave you the information,
right?
Gave you the knowledge so that you could save yourself, right? So what I would encourage anybody who's in addiction is to realize that you are the hero of your own story. And it really is up to you at the end of the day. You know, you can have help and assistance along the way, but at the end of the day, it's in your hands, you know, and I'm a big believer in how we use words. I don't really agree with, one of the things that really bothers me about AA is that they encourage the people to say, I'm an alcoholic, you know. Now, wait a second. You know, words are very, very powerful things. Very powerful things. And what comes out of your mouth, your subconscious hears. And if you repetitiously, for however many years you're in AA, hear, I am an alcoholic. Well, you're programming your own thought patterns when you hear that. To hear repetitiously, I am an alcoholic, I am an alcoholic, without any consideration for the fact that perhaps there's one day that you might not be. So,
well, you know, there's a couple things here. I'm feeding back a little bit on from your device, Danny. Just so you know. Okay, thank you. That's great. The thing is, you know, not only do we have the concept of the repetition of I am an alcoholic, and then there are many definitions which are applied to that word. They become, you know, part of the dogmatic approach there, and it's just like any other indoctrination. But to me, the most disturbing aspect there, because I ended up going through that cycle a bit. I was court-ordered to do so when I was a teenager and all that. That's a whole other story. But at that time, I actually wasn't addicted to anything other than the cigarettes, which I'm still smoking to this day. Mm-hmm. But quite honestly, the thing that disturbed me about that approach is the statement, I am powerless. This this is what I threw away even before I was awake, even before I was remotely aware of most of the world around me, to be honest with you. The concept of being powerless is absolutely revolting to me. And this I'm sure you're going to touch on as well, but I just wanted to kind of chime in on that really quick.
Yeah, it's the feeling of powerlessness. The only way that I guess the best analogy that I can use to try to relate to people what addiction is like, especially when you've had like a binge or something like that the next morning, it feels like being an infant in the womb of a dead woman. That's addiction. Mm-hmm. You're in the fetal position and you're surrounded with darkness and the womb is dead. That's what it feels like. But if I could, I'd like to tell you briefly tell you my personal experience on addiction and how I became addicted and how I recovered, if that's okay.
No, that's absolutely. I was hoping that you'd be willing to do that.
Absolutely. Because I hope that there's somebody out there. The thing with being an addict is that you feel that you are alone. So if I share my story, I hope that the people who are in that cycle right now are going to go, oh my God, somebody else knows exactly how it feels and they came out of it. But I don't consider myself an alcoholic, and people find that very funny. And I'll touch upon that later. There's a such thing as alcoholism and an allergy to alcohol. The two symptoms mimic each other very, very closely, but I'll explain later how you can tell the difference. But the addiction that really had a vice grip on my life was painkillers, hydrocodone specifically. And addiction starts off in different ways. Nobody goes out one day and says they want to be an addict. It happens through a series of insane events, or subtle events. But for me, years ago, my mother she's a 2-time cancer survivor. And I talk about my parents a lot because I freaking love my parents. And she's probably the strongest woman on the face of the planet. I've never met anybody stronger. She could punch a planet through a hurricane and keep going. But she developed cervical cancer. And of course, the first thing that doctors do is they want to put you on chemo, radiation, and give you a bunch of painkillers. So started off simple enough. I think one day I'd overexerted myself or had been exercising too much, something like that. And I had a lot of aches and pains. And, it always starts off small. Can I get a painkiller to ease this off? Before then, I'd always been hesitant to try anything like that. I had been drinking since I was like 13 or 14, but I wouldn't do anything like that. Things like harder drugs or prescription drugs, I just had a bad feeling about. But I figured one wouldn't hurt, right? And anybody who's ever had a painkiller addiction, it gives you this feeling of euphoria. Mm-hmm. You just feel complete euphoria, and everything slows down. Everything is just cool, and you feel numb all over. You could care less, when it gets into your system.
And not only that, but there's a strength kind of that you sort of feel as though it's a false sense of strength, right. Because I suffered from exactly the same type of problem that you did. Of course, I stepped up even past the hydrocodones to the harder ones, and because as time went on, you can't achieve the same euphoria. You can't achieve the same results without moving up. Right. You build a tolerance, like everybody says, but this is part of the equation, certainly. And this is the point, though, is that it does. I'm just kind of chiming in to say, yeah, I agree with you, and I understand, and please continue.
Right. When you first start, you take one, and then you find an excuse to take another one, and the excuses keep going. I know for me at the time, I was already having a back and forth battle with my alcoholism or my alcohol allergy. So I was surrounded by people who were non-addicts for the most part. I mean, everybody has addicts in their family or alcoholics in their family, and if you don't believe that you do, then you're in denial. But I was surrounded by those types of people, and they knew that I had an issue with it and that I had struggled with it in my youth, my drinking anyway. And whenever I started to slowly realize I was addicted to painkillers, which was, at first you tell yourself, no, I'm not. It's just a few. It's okay. And you're actually looking at the time to go, okay, well, if I cut this one in half, I won't have a heart attack. At first you're worried about things like that. But like you said, you start to build up a tolerance, and it takes more and more to get the same feeling of euphoria. So for me, I did not want to make it obvious that I had compounded addictions, because I already felt enough embarrassment or looming eyes or watching eyes over the first one that I did not want anybody to know that a second one had crept up, because I didn't want to feel ashamed. Can you relate to that?
Well, not only can I relate to that, but I got to tell you this, and you might actually have had a similar experience. What happened to me is it was a medical situation, so this was something that was prescribed to me by a doctor, and I trusted a doctor. I had broken my neck, so I had a legitimate reason to want to alleviate the pain. It does sometimes start out as a legitimate problem.
Right.
And here's the thing. To be honest with you, after a long sort of cycle of taking them and getting sick of it and worrying about the idea that I would become addicted, because I had experimented with many substances when I was younger, and but never had gotten hooked on anything outside of cigarettes. That's something, like I said, 30 years later, I'm still smoking them. But,
right.
But the thing is that outside of that, I had drank, I had smoked things, I had done just about anything with the exception of a needle, because I had never, I had a serious problem with that because of experiences in my childhood. And the deal was this. I one day just said, well, you know what? I don't want to take these anymore because I fear what's going to happen to me. And I stopped taking them, and I woke up so ill that quite honestly, I thought something was very, very wrong with me, and started to dehydrate and suffer in a way that pneumonia, broken bones in the past, and any illness I had ever gone through could not compare to the agony that it seemed as though every nerve ending in my body was in. I called someone that I knew that was a smart person that knew a bit about the human body, and I said, "What in the world is going on here? I feel like I'm dying, and I'm not afraid to die. But if this is what's happening, I'd like to know why." And this very intelligent person, who I'm not going to name right now, said to me, "You are withdrawing." Because he knew I was taking the painkillers. And meanwhile, I had, like I said, plenty of experience in my childhood with heroin addicts, with cocaine addicts, with alcoholics, watching the delirium tremens for myself, not on me, but on other people. I had watched other people go through all kinds of withdrawals and did not recognize that this was exactly what had happened to me.
Right, exactly. And people need to understand that whenever you go through a withdrawal on especially opiates, the waning drug in your system starts to attack your mind, and it starts to make you feel pain. For me, it was extreme migraine headaches. If I didn't have hydrocodone in my system, after a while, a migraine would come on so strong that would compel me and thrust me forward that I have to find some, right, to alleviate what was happening to me, because it was leaving my system and I didn't want to. So people who haven't experienced that, you don't understand that there's a lot of pain to the withdrawal process, and that's what compels a lot of addicts to rapidly seek the substance of choice. For me, and I'm very visual. Everybody knows I have a very, very strong imagination. But for me, you almost could have took like a little fishing rod and attached it to my forehead and dangled a little pink pill in front of me, right? I'd be driving down the road and can almost see, just like you see the white stripes in the road, I would see little hydrocodones, right? My mind was pulling me towards more of this substance. And if I slowed down the engine, then that pain would kick in, that migraine would kick in. And people who aren't genetically predisposed for addiction don't understand how powerful that is. That you can't look away from it. You can't close your eyes. It's constantly right in the forefront of your mind, and it is, it pulls you forward.
Now this is the psychological aspect, okay? But there's a real physical aspect to it as well, which I'm sorry, but I want to voice here. It's not just the pain and, shut up, deal with your pain. What are you, are you a wuss? What is your problem? This is not just that. You dehydrate. Seizures are possible. There's a change in your heart rate. There is a change in your adrenaline levels. There is the sweating, the fluctuation of body temperature. All of these elements all at once. Then, in your case, you got the migraine headaches. In my case, I could feel every broken bone, every severe sprain, every piece of damage that I was carrying in my body would start to almost vibrate.
Right.
And this is something that if you haven't experienced it, if if your body is not, basically torturing itself in this fashion, it's very hard to relate this to somebody who hasn't gone through it. Very, very difficult.
It's very difficult to try to get across to somebody. It really is. But, as time progressed with mine, I became very, very sneaky with how I would hide it. Nobody really even had a suspicion that I was addicted to painkillers, save my father. Because me and my dad were extremely close. Now, he had an idea. He never said anything. He would subtly say things to me to let me know that he knew, right? But other than that, not even my ex-wife was aware of it until after we separated. You become very crafty, and it's almost like Spider-Man comes up with these crazy excuses, to hide his identity. And it's almost like that in a negative way. You have a fake identity when you're hiding an addiction. You come up with stupid excuses like, I was cleaning the chimney, like in the latest movie, right? Just the dumbest excuses to hide it. And, I had gotten up there pretty bad, where I was taking anywhere from 10 to 14 a day. And sometimes whenever I would have relapses in alcoholism, I was topping that off, with alcohol. So to this day, I don't understand how I survived it. I really don't. But, the process of addiction and the emotional toll, because, emotions are essentially chemical, and the emotional part plays a huge role because, whenever you don't have it or people see you as an addict, and your chemicals are off balance, your brain chemistry is off balance, you feel emotionally dead, and you need that one thing that hasn't left you, or that whatever chemical it is. But, for me, and I want to get out of the mud right now, and everybody knows I'm a huge Radiohead fan. Love Radiohead. I think there's so much deep philosophy in their lyrics if people really pay attention, but there's a song called Lotus Flower. Have you heard this one?
Sure have.
All right. And to me, it's one of the most beautiful songs because in Buddhism, the lotus flower, and I really want anybody who's an addict or knows somebody who's an addict to listen to this. A lotus flower is this bud that grows out in the swamps of Asia. And it grows out in the swamps. And what happens is it falls down into the swamp and it sinks to the very, very bottom past all the snakes and the creeping, crawling things, and it goes down to the darkest, darkest depths of the swamp. And then when the sun comes out, it begins to rise up. And it comes up through the muck and through the mire. And as soon as it hits the surface and it can see the sunlight, it starts to unfurl and becomes this beautiful, one of the most beautiful flowers you'll ever see is a lotus flower. And to this day, scientists don't understand how this bud can go to the depths of the swamp. And then when it comes up to the surface, there's not one speck of dirt on any of the petals. And that's what addiction, when you begin to recover, is like. You go down to those depths, but whenever you do come up and you see the light of the sun, all of that stuff falls off of you. And if there's anything I really want to iterate to people out there, especially if you're in the middle of it, that you can reach that place. It's not hard. It's not difficult. And when addicts are ready to turn their life around, and they start looking at the options of how they can do it, it feels like you're pushing a boulder up a mountain. It doesn't have to feel that way. The thought processes that got you addicted and got you that substance years and years and years faithfully, the same thought process, that powerful thing in between your ears, can just as easily get you out of it. It doesn't have to be a hard process. It can be easy. In fact, it is easy. So I want to let everybody know that, because when people address recovery or getting clean of a substance, they make it sound so hard. You know what I mean?
Well, this is the thing. When we are not the natural creatures that we are intended to be, when we are out of balance, and we're only looking at the one side of it, this is all a psychological problem. This is only a physical problem. Just like you had said earlier, the problem and the reason why there is such a failure, such a high failure rate in so many different types of substance abuse treatment is because they have a failure to examine the full breadth of the human being. They don't really take into account all of the aspects. And, if you ignore your mind long enough, it'll start to play tricks on you,
Yeah. Exactly. And I don't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just going to pretty much just lay out to you that if you ignore one, or if you ignore a couple of aspects of the entire person, if you don't do this from a holistic kind of standpoint in one form or another, this is going to increase the likelihood that you'll fail, but it's only because you haven't really attacked the whole problem, because this seeps into every aspect of your person.
Every aspect. And when I finally decided, and I find it funny that the two things I struggle with was opiates, which slow things down, and then alcohol, which speeds things up. So it's like you're torn. And I like to say, guilt and regret keep you pulled in the past, and worry and fear keep you pulled in the future. But neither exist. You only have the present. And alcohol addiction and opiate addiction is the same way. It's keeping you pulled from everywhere except the present moment, which is all you have. And it's really all that you need, is the present moment to make that decision. And for me, being that I'm a Virgo, I wanted to understand the brain chemistry of it. And like I said the other night, I won't get too deep into it, but I wanted to understand how it was affecting my chemistry. And I came across two books by Dr. Joanne Larson. And I was mispronouncing her name the other day. I apologize. But it's Dr. Joanne Larson, and she's got a book called 7 Weeks to Sobriety and Depression Free Naturally. And when I read these books and began to understand how chemical addiction was affecting my brain, that was the intellectual part of my addiction, of the fourfold nature. I was becoming educated on how it was affecting me biochemically, minerally, right? And one of the first things that got me out of my addiction was she talks about vitamin supplementation and a holistic approach to rebalancing brain chemistry. Typically, addictions are triggered by traumatic events. My mom having cancer was a traumatic event. So you reach for something because your chemistry is off balance. So I would encourage everybody to please pick those books up. She gives you regimens in there, such as supplements like high doses of vitamin C, DMAE, L-tryptophan, fish oil. So that was one of the first things that I did when I was ready to get to quit. I went and got a pill kit and got the supplements that she recommended. And you had Dr. Leslie. I didn't catch her last name. What was Leslie's last name the other night?
Botha.
I went to her websites, QSciences and TrueHope.com, and I would encourage everybody else to do it too. From what I was looking at, the supplements that she recommends are a lot that I took. And once I started taking these supplements, it was about 3 days. 3 days of an almost decade addiction. There were no withdrawal symptoms. Wasn't even thinking about it. I mean, I felt better. My mind was clear, and it was a miracle, But it was because I had the intelligent knowledge to know that it would work, not to believe that it would work, but to know that it would work biochemically.
And normally, Daniel, just for those again who don't understand, the minimum amount of time for the withdrawal, which I was describing before, is 7 to 10 days.
Yeah.
Is 7 to 10 days of exactly that level of agony, the sleeplessness, the sweating, the pain, the change in temperature, and the twisting of the psychology that goes on during that time.
Right.
Is immeasurable. And afterwards, even after you're done with the hell of that, then there is a drain. There is a serious depletion of your, of all the nutrients that are required in your body, because you've just gone through, draining them through, well, I don't want to get, too graphic here, but believe me, your body starts to release not only the toxins, but the positive elements. You dehydrate in a lot of cases. Malnourishment happens in a lot of cases. And this is exactly the type of knowledge that I know that most people don't have. And quite honestly, I did not have.
Well, I'll tell you this, and you're absolutely correct on the withdrawal symptoms. However, and I find this ironic, it takes 3 days for a chemical to get out of the body. Okay, that's the physical. And I find that funny, Yeshua or Jesus was in the tomb 3 days and 3 nights before he resurrected. So after the 3 days, after the chemical is out of your body, you have the rest of the withdrawal symptoms. The chemical is out. Now, the psychological and the physical aspects of it takes about 7 to 10 days. Now, with the vitamin supplementation, what you're basically doing is you're knocking those 7 to 10 days off, period.
Right.
Because the vitamin B100, if you're taking vitamin B complex, that gives you the energy. The fish oil, gives you the brain fat. The DMA helps you to focus. Oh boy, does it help you to focus. It's a wonder vitamin. It's a wonder supplement. It stimulates the third eye. So that was the first step. And the next step was discipline, okay? Self-discipline. And I started off small when I was ready to recover. I figured if I could discipline my body and other things, then I can stop that process of wanting to go for that substance. So I was reading a book, and this may sound like it doesn't make sense as far as addiction goes, but it does. But I picked up a book called Awakening the Buddha Within by Lama Surya Das. Mm-hmm. And it essentially was a guy who was a Jew, who was raised a Jew, who converted to Buddhism. And it's a modern approach to Buddhism. And it starts talking about Dharma, the path of peace, and, the fourfold nature. And this book really resonated with me as I was walking out of this addiction. And there's concepts in there about, self-discipline. And, as all your listeners can tell, and I know you can, I'm a talker. Love to talk. Mm. Love to give knowledge out. So I said, all right, I'm going to take a 30-day vow of silence. I'm not going to speak for 30 days. Because if you can suppress creativity or energy in one area, it's going to pop up in other areas, right? So I said, okay, I'm going to self-discipline myself. I had not been disciplined, when I was an addict, and now I'm going to start disciplining myself. So I did that. And to be able to go into your own mind and be present in your own mind and not have to respond to other people and constantly interact with the world helps you to be able to quiet your mind. And especially if you're a recovering addict, it certainly can quiet that voice, that nagging voice, as it slowly dies in the back of your head. It's very, very peaceful. So I would encourage people to pick up that book if you're ready to start walking that path. And Buddhism isn't a religion, it's just the science of peace. That's all it is. And
see, I would also recommend that anybody who does not take the time to silently meditate, regardless of what your religious, set of beliefs might be, the concept of silent contemplation, of bringing yourself back to simplicity, to getting in touch with just your breathing, doing this to try and calm the more chaotic nature of the human mind, trying to refocus, to reorganize oneself emotionally. This is also rather helpful, regardless of whether you're imprisoned in the world of an addiction of any kind. And this doesn't just doesn't just limit itself to substances, but I mean there are many addictions, and they all really do lead to the same thing. And I'm sure you're going to touch on that at some point here. But the thing is that there is absolutely nothing but things that you can gain from trying to quiet the self and trying to just simply get back to your natural state. I say it all the time. If you are only concerned with your breathing and with your body, you may notice certain things. You may be able to control certain things. And I know that the Buddhist meditation, just as well as many other spiritual, let's just say, belief systems, focus on this, and it's for a very good reason. Just like prayer is silent in most. In most faiths, there are silent prayers. There are quiet times. There is a reason why there are quiets. They're good for the being, regardless of which angle you're coming at it from. So, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. And on the same meditative note, there's a technique that I started to use. There's a maxim that says, "As above, so below; as within, so without." And in Buddhism, you have Zen gardens, and there's a picture that a digital hourglass did of me that shows my Zen garden in disarray, and then me raking it, which I was actually doing at the front half of the show, raking out the leaves and plucking out the weeds. And the concept, the reason that the Buddhists do this in Zen meditation is because your Zen garden is supposed to be a representation, a physical manifestation of your inner subconscious. So when you're raking the leaves, and it doesn't have to be a Zen garden. It could be when you're washing dishes or when you're cleaning your house or cleaning your car. You assign certain qualities of your subconscious or your personality to the aspects that your conscious mind is seeing. So, for example, if I'm raking all the pine straw out of my Zen garden, I say to myself, this is my worry. Now, as your conscious mind sees you raking out worry, the subconscious mind will respond. If the conscious mind sees me kneel down and grab a weed, and I say, this is a craving for a certain substance, and it sees, my conscious mind watches me pluck it out of that garden. My subconscious mind registers that as me plucking that out of my personality. Does that make sense?
Well, it certainly does to me, because, applying the aspects of one's own inner workings to representative entities, one way or another. Some people apply it to, let's just say you pray to a certain saint because that saint represents this particular aspect that is your worry at this time. By turning it over to that saint, you're actually releasing the tension that you have because of your belief in it. When one who believes in multiple gods, in fact, ascribes certain aspects of their life to be ruled by, to be assisted by, to be watched over by one of those gods who will be particularly interested and focused on that particular aspect of their life. This does the same thing. The idea of, and in a very basic sense, the let go and let God kind of thing, right? Because God is supposed to be the all-encompassing agent of all things. What happens is when you relieve your conscious mind of the responsibility of the tension of it, this does have a way of allowing your subconscious to relax and to begin to deal with it in a much more clear fashion, because it's not being stressed by the conscious mind. So it's a valid psychological technique. It's sort of like your own mind control for yourself.
Exactly. And on the opposite spectrum, one of the things I would do, and I did this with my alcohol allergy, was, and some people they think it's a morbid fixation, but really it's not. Everybody knows that I have an incredible amount of admiration for the Hannibal Lecter series. I even have a dog named Hannibal. But there's a concept in those books, and the show has recently touched on it. But Hannibal Lecter has something called a memory palace. And essentially is whenever he goes into his meditation, he imagines his conscious mind and his subconscious mind as a mansion. And he assigns different rooms to different aspects of his personality. And I thought this was brilliant. If you read the books, it'll teach you how to do it, believe it or not. But it's a way so that when you do go into meditation, you can actually go into your own psyche and imagine, visualize you rearranging furniture or going for certain books in your library or going into your basement and dealing with whatever's there. So it's that inner work. So you in a Zen garden or something like that, you're doing outer work as without. But you also want to do it within. And one of the things that I did, especially with whenever I have a flare-up of drinking, is I went into my memory palace. And I said, okay, the alcoholism or the alcohol allergy is a demon. And when I'm not here, it is running through my mansion, i.e. my mind. And I need to get rid of it. Where is it at? And I said, it's in my basement. You know, it's in my basement while I'm here, hiding. And so I went into my basement. And summoned it, essentially. And there was somebody who taught me how to do this sort of, one day she told me that she knew how to talk to her demons, which addiction is a demon. And I said, how do you do that? And essentially she said that when she sits in meditation, she imagines the demon in front of her, and she asks what it needs, why is it there? And when she gets to the root cause of why it's there and what it needs, it vanishes. So I basically took her technique and applied it to my memory palace. I would go into my basement, summon this demon, which would appear as, you know, smoke and thunder and this horrible demon, and then command it to leave. And it has no choice but to leave because it's my mansion. And when it does, you know, in its place, because the Bible says that an unclean spirit, when it leaves a man, it'll travel, it'll come back, and it'll find it's the house that it came from swept and unkept, and it brings 7 more demons with it. Right? So one of the key things I did in my memory palace was I banished that smoke demon. And then I invited another entity to take its place, a being of light and love. And I gave it permission to walk the halls of my memory palace. And everywhere where the demon had issued smoke and darkness and pain and worry, it would illuminate and give compassion and love, you know. So that's one of the ways that I dealt with it. So so far we've covered the emotional, right?
Right.
We've covered the spiritual too a bit, or the intellectual anyway. So those are some of the aspects of how I dealt with it.
Well, right, and we also started to cover the physical, the concept of, preparing yourself for the drain that would otherwise come in because of the physical aspects of actually confronting it that way, which also do, again, turn and feed upon the psychological and the spiritual aspects. I mean, there is such a thing as breaking a man's spirit, and this does happen quite often, and this is often why people immediately relapse no matter how determined they are when they start up. Really quickly, a couple of messages from the Skype that I just want to address really fast. Michael, the first thing, about this, you're asking what this has to do with freedom or with the idea of liberty. Let me explain something to you, sir. The reason why this has something to do with it is this. How are we going to combat the greater global system, the greater enemy, which is at war with us? Okay, I'm sorry to tell you, if we are sick, if we are dependent upon a chemical, if we are trapped in a cycle which does this kind of damage that any of these addictions can do, and I don't just mean substance either. There are people that have gambling addictions. There are people that have various types of addictions.
Well, how are we going to set brush fires in the minds of men if the minds of men are unkept?
Very good. Much better. See, this is the reason why I love having you on, because you're just way more eloquent than I am. And another comment is that you have a very kindly voice, which is a big improvement over my rough, nasty sound. So, again, thanks so much for joining me, because this is stuff that I'm so glad you can articulate a whole lot better. And I know I'm interrupting you a lot, but it's just I want to add in and stand with what you're saying, and absolutely lend my support to absolutely everything. I mean, I knew, and we didn't even go into this in great detail off the air, but I knew, just knowing the kind of guy that you are, that you were going to present what I would like presented on this subject.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Because it's extremely important, I think, for all of us to get well, not only to release ourselves from the demonic, the evil, whatever it is you want to call it, the negative influences which are obvious in the physical world, but even the ones which are right in front of us and right in our own bodies, right in our own homes. If we don't do that, then we will not be a healthy enough force to stand up together spiritually, emotionally, socially. It will not happen if most of us are ill. So this is why I offer this tonight. So go ahead, Daniel. I'm sorry.
Right, and hopefully as I continue, I'll be able to connect the dots for the person who left a Skype message on why it's important to freedom and liberty, because it's a big issue in regards to that. But on the last note of the physical, I will say that I would advise anybody who's coming out of an addiction to get physical in some way. For me, it was yoga, and I got to tell you, yoga makes you feel excellent. Especially if you're somebody who's coming off of painkillers and because you had an injury, yoga is excellent, and because it gets the breathing going, which increases white blood cells, which is best for healing, and it gets the blood pumping to where, especially an opiate addiction, makes you kind of lazy and you want to lay down and not move very much. Yoga is very good for that. But so through those processes, through vitamin supplementation, getting in touch with my spirituality, educating myself on biochemistry and the triggers of addiction and what causes addiction, and the emotions balance themselves out as you do the others. And that is how you reach the balance of the fourfold nature. You have to work in every one of those areas. And work is a bad word. Play. And like I said earlier, words are very important.
Let me interrupt you really quickly and say that I don't believe it's a matter of work. Your life, it's actually about living. It's not a matter of work or play, because work and play are simply smaller aspects of life. It's a matter of getting back to living, and of course, just like in just about every meditative process that I've ever studied, looked at, or practiced myself, that's why they usually begin with your breathing, because this is key. It affects everything, and of course, brain chemistry is another thing that I do want to make sure you touch on when we're in this area here. So, please, if you would, I'm sorry again to kind of interrupt and push a little bit, but it's just I want to make sure we hit everything we can.
Right. Breathing is very, very key because the Hindus call it prana, or life force, or chi, and they say it's not the air, but it's on the air. And the more that you properly breathe, you oxygenate the brain. Vitamin C in Dr. Joanne Larson's books, she tells you that it oxygenates the brain. It's very important to have a lot of oxygen to the brain. That's why breathing and yoga is so important. Or running, doing whatever you can to oxygenate the brain to get it balanced back out. So those are some of the practices that got me out of it. Got me out of it. But now I want to touch on, if it's okay, I'd like to touch on alcohol a little bit.
Oh yeah, please, because alcohol is even more prominent and even more misunderstood, I would say, by people when it comes to the concept of addiction. They just think, well, an alcoholic just needs to stop. They're doing it to themselves because they enjoy it, they like it. This is not always the case. There are people who do enjoy it. But generally when you see somebody who is literally destroying their lives with it, who is, sweating it and making themselves a completely dysfunctional creature, you're not looking at somebody who's having any sort of enjoyment and is not just picking it up because it's a good time. And this is usually one of those things where it's like, listen, if you don't like being drunk, then don't drink. It's not always that simple either, folks.
No, and the thing with alcoholism, as I said earlier, there's two forms of this illness. One is alcoholism and one is alcohol allergy. This is in Dr. Larson's book too, and this was a revelation for me because I've been told all my life I was an alcoholic. Now, my father and my mother drank very, very heavily. My father began drinking heavily after Vietnam because he had a post-traumatic stress disorder and he lost a brother. Fortunately, one day he just quit. And I never saw my father drink, maybe once, I believe. So it was amazing to me that somebody who, before I was born, was known for being, he just would consume it. And then I never saw that aspect. And it was amazing to me that he had that great strength. Now, I did, because me and my mother have been through everything together, the death of her father. She's my best friend, and we've been through everything. And I did watch her struggle with it, and I remember it was like when she was sober, she was the best mom in the world, but then, when her pain would come and she would try to medicate it, then this different person would come out. And I remember thinking, I don't want my kids to see that ever. You know what I mean? I was the guy who was out there, pumping the gas in the car before she could get out there to flood the engine, things like that. But thank goodness, one day when I was a young teenager, if a teenager, after seeing this in early youth, she just made a decision one day, and I have not seen her drunk since. This is years ago, So it was an inspiration to me to know that, okay, most people would look at me and say, well, you have two parents that drank very heavily. But I would look at it the other way and say, yeah, but they quit. And they did it on a dime, right? They did it on a dime. Mm-hmm. And it was, to me, that, that was an inspiration for me. Now, as far as alcoholism and alcohol allergy, Dr. Larson will tell you that alcoholics are the type of people who drink every day at some volume. The symptoms of alcohol allergy look or mimic alcoholism, but essentially what it is when alcohol gets into the system of someone who is allergic to it, they create a binge. Okay? Now, they'll go days on end drinking, but then they can go very, very long spans without drinking. It's only when the alcohol gets into their system that they start to exhibit the symptoms of an alcoholic. So whenever I read that, it felt like chains had come off of me, because I realized as I went down the symptom list, I'm not an alcoholic. I'm allergic to alcohol, which means as long as it doesn't touch my system, then I'm fine. Now, some people who are listening will go, that's psychosomatic. That's what an alcoholic could say. Well, good, great. I hope they do. I hope that alcoholics can say that. I continue to say that words are very important, and I want to preface why. I had an uncle, my Uncle Don, and he's one of the main reasons that I chose to become a writer. He's one of the biggest contributing factors, but which ironically, he was a Freemason, so he gave me this bit of knowledge when I was very young. But
one thing really quickly, Daniel, is the title of that book, which has that incredible cover. Want to tell people where they can get it and all that really quickly too, by the way?
Which book is that?
The one that you just put out.
Oh, yeah. Then Came the Flood is my novel. You can get it at Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, BooksAMillion.com, WestBopress.com. And if you go to the website that I'm an editor and contributor to, ZenInTheCar.com, you'll see the widgets. You can order it there. So you can get it at all those places. You can get it in hardback, paperback, and ebook. Sorry,
I just wanted to make sure we got there, because we're talking about you being a writer, and I know that I'll forget because I'm rather engrossed in the conversation here, and I do that. I stop looking at the clock and lose it, so I didn't want to do that on you and forget.
No worries. I didn't even. My novel was the furthest thing from my mind. I wanted to come on here tonight to share my story and help people.
No, I know that was your intent, but at the same time, I wanted to make sure, because I've just read some excerpts from that book. Mm-hmm. And man, this guy, and I don't say this about too many writers, this is a very, very talented man. I want you guys to check it out, because the imagery is amazing. I love it when I see people that are writing multifaceted, multiple layers of imagery. This is not, a simplistic, self-published kind of, half-assed vanity kind of thing. This is really a well-textured piece of work. And that's just from the excerpts I've read so far. When I get the whole thing read, we're going to have a discussion about it, I got to tell you.
Thank you, man. I'm very, very humbled. I'm very, very humbled because that's why I write. I write to touch other people and make them feel not alone. And it's a very intimate thing because a reader is letting me inside their mind, and I really, really appreciate that. But getting back to the story, and you guys go ahead and buy the book. We're done with marketing my book. I want to get back to the context.
Absolutely.
We can talk about the book anytime, But I had an Uncle Don, and he asked me one day. I was little, and he said, "What subject are they telling you is the most important in school?" And I said, "Math." He said, "They're wrong." I said, "They're wrong." He goes, "Yeah, they're wrong." He says, "It's words and English and literature." How do you figure? I mean, all these teachers are telling me it's math, and you're telling me it's words. And he was a painter by trade, self-made man, had his own painting company. And he said, "Listen," he said, "I've got competition in this town, and they'll run an ad in the newspaper that says, 'We'll paint your house, $500.' And I'll come behind them, and I'll say, we'll pressure wash, we'll strip, we'll prime, we'll trim, and then we'll paint, and then second coat your house for $3,000. And he says, "You know what I just said?" And I said, "What's that?" He said, "We'll paint your house." He said, "And people will come to me." So words are very important. And ironically, my cousin, his son, Jason Crumpton, is also if you guys love my stuff, he is one of the most prolific poets I have ever, I dabble in poetry a little bit. I know that you appreciate poetry. He's one of the most prolific poets you're ever going to come across, and I have been begging him to come on board at zeninthecar.com and become the chief editor of the First Renaissance section, and we've been kind of going back and forth. I hope he's listening, and I hope that he's going to reconsider, and you guys would love it too. But and I'd like to also, go ahead and give him a shout out because he's also a recovering addict and has reached sobriety through the same types of methods to his spirituality. And I'm very, very proud of him. And he's an example to me, and I love him. And, he and I can connect in a way as far as addiction goes and recovery goes that other people can't, because we've both been in the same, we started out on that dark path together, and it seems that both of us have recovered at the same time. So words are very important. His father taught me that, and how you speak about your condition is important, and you need to self-talk. You need to really, really self-talk yourself through this. And everybody who knows me knows that I'm a big superhero geek and science fiction geek, and the reason is because I like to find myself in the hero of stories. And I think that if everyone out there who has an addiction problem will do that too, you'll find an immense growth. Why do we like superheroes or heroes, period? Because they overcome impossible odds. A hero without impossible odds is quite boring, don't you think?
Well, yeah, because, after all, if the hero's journey is easy, then, how interesting can the story be, right?
Right. So if you're an addict and you put yourself in the cape, put yourself in the Spider-Man suit, whatever, you're that hero, and you can come out of it. But I do want you touched on relapses a minute ago, and that's something that I want to talk about. Is whenever a person does recover, and then they have a relapse, everyone around them tends to go, "Oh, see, whatever they were doing didn't work," right?
Mm-hmm.
Whatever they were doing.
That's usually the first thing is, see, now that just couldn't, you couldn't escape it. You couldn't get the monkey off your back. You couldn't stay on the wagon.
Right.
All these kind of statements. And, I know you have a different viewpoint about that, so go ahead.
That's what they say. They'll look at you. You can go 20 years without touching a substance, and then you have one slip up, and everybody comes down on you like a hammer, and they go, see there? See? Well, no. Every hero stumbles. Every hero stumbles, and I would urge people who do know family members that are addicted that happen to come into a relapse, and I don't want to. This is going to get personal, and I'm not trying to be malicious or anything like that. But I went through a divorce recently, and after that divorce, I did relapse into alcoholism quite bad. But I don't really even call that a relapse. I call that going through a divorce. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, a person who is attempting to keep themselves clean of the things that are dangerous, when you're faced with the types of things that you wind up going through, especially in divorce the way it exists now. I defy you to survive it really without turning to something that you shouldn't, one way or another. And it doesn't even necessarily have to be a substance. A lot of people end up attaching different behaviors, and believe me, I went through a pretty nasty divorce some years ago, and I regret so many things that grew from that.
It's like it's this grace period that you have where you're allowed to do stupid stuff, and it's you get away with it.
Yeah, your IQ is allowed to drop for I'm not sure what the time period is. I guess it varies, but the point is you're allowed to be kind of damaged for a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
I was severely damaged. Now, and my divorce wasn't caused because of my substance abuse. It was a contributing factor, but it wasn't the trigger mechanism. But and I don't mean to be malicious, but it is what it is, and it's my story to tell, and I'll tell it. And she's probably not listening, or in her family anyway. She can't stand the sight of me and my voice. But
another thing I identify with, Daniel. But sorry, go ahead.
There you go. But she did not have a substance abuse problem, and she couldn't see it through my eyes. You understand? So while I was married and I would have relapses, I would wake up in the morning already feeling emotionally beaten. Because you wake up with that feeling, what did I do last night? What did I say? And in that instance, a lot of the times I would get eyes of condemnation, of disappointment, of humiliation. Why are you doing this? Why can't you stop? Do you not love me? Things like that. And it wasn't her fault, but it was because not knowing the feelings, she could not identify with the cycle that I was in, right? So you have to hear things like that, which is, you embarrass me, you humiliate me, and then you go and you're alone, And so I would urge people out there who don't have substance abuse problems, that are around someone that does, to don't get mad, don't come at them with anger. That's not the best way to go about it. But on the flip note, when I started to get into the public eye, I guess I'm in the public eye, I don't know. One of the decisions I had to make was, would I share this aspect of my life with my readers? It's a tough decision to make, right? Is this something I'm going to talk about? Is this something that I want to share with people, or do I want to keep a veneer or a shield between me and them, that's not personal? And thankfully, the universe provided me with somebody, a very close friend of mine. Her name is Monica, and I'm very, very proud of her, by the way, because she just passed a entrance exam to go back to college. So, Monica, I'm very proud of you. But the universe brought this person into my life, and not getting into too much of details with her because that's her story to tell, but our paths are very, very similar, right? She can relate to a lot of the things that I've been through, and one of the first or second conversations that we ever had, we went to a place of meditation, and we just, after only knowing each other a short amount of time, we just said, this is all the messed up stuff about me, rah, back and forth. Okay, this is me, right? Flaws and all, warts and all. Okay, right. Do you judge me? No, I don't judge you. Do you judge me? No, I don't judge you. So right at the beginning, there was this mutual understanding of we are both flawed human beings, and this is all the crazy stuff we did in the past. So you have this connection with somebody who's been in similar shoes, been on a similar path, that will not judge you and will not condemn you. And one day, after my divorce, when I was in a bad place, because you've been through a divorce and you know that you hit a depression, and you hit that ditch. And whereas with my ex-wife, who could not see through my eyes, who did not understand the pain of that type of a path, couldn't do this, and that's not her fault. Okay,
no, let me just add something there though, real quick, because you and I really agreed on something here, and I think it's appropriate to mention it, and that is that the judgment, the condemnation that arises from those who don't understand is actually so detrimental, because what is not understood primarily is that if you think you're angry with the person who is involved in, partaking in the behavior, the substance, whatever it is, if you think you're upset with them, if you think you're disturbed by them, let me tell you something. The internal struggle, the damage that one does to oneself, the beating that I'll just be straight up with it. The beating I gave to myself over the situation I was in was
worse than anything they could say.
Absolutely. Nobody was going to dig as deep, put me down as far as I was already doing to myself. It wasn't possible. All they were doing really was piling on top of the tremendously efficient job of destroying myself that I was doing. All they were doing was adding.
Right. And see, and with Monica, I had the chance to have a mirror opposite of that. And one day when I was in the deepest part of the depression, she had come to spend the day with me. And I even had a beer in my hand, while it was happening, and I'm waiting for condemnation or judgment to come from this person. And I was like, I'm sorry that I've been drinking so much. And she says, it's okay. Everybody has a crutch and a compulsion. It's okay. It's okay to not be okay, every now and then. And I remember looking down and, thinking about everything from the past and feeling the resentment and the guilt. And I just said, am I forgiven? And I remember looking to the right, and we were sitting on some steps together, and she looked at me with these eyes of total compassion, because she'd been there. She'd been right where I was at, and she said, you know that you're forgiven, right? Well, a few days after that, I stayed in a slump for a few days, and then I had a big decision to make, after this process. And it was a big decision regarding, am I going to quit doing what I'm doing in life, or am I going to keep going? And, I kind of closed my eyes for a minute, and then I saw her face with that compassion and that forgiveness.
What a pain in the neck. Sorry about that, folks. Another little technical problem, and I will resume the discussion with Mr. Crumpton if I can get him back. Let's see now. Nope, it's calling him. Good deal. I'll tell you. Daniel.
I'm here.
Look, I'm sorry, man. I don't know what happened there, but it was just a lost connection. And unfortunately, we're now down to about 22 minutes here. And you were in the midst of telling the story about sitting there with Monica and Judgment and how you had gone through a few days afterwards. I'm trying to catch you back up to where you were in case you lost your place.
Yeah.
Sorry about that again, sir.
No worries, no worries. Yeah, a few days after that, I had to come to a place of decision on whether or not I was going to, quit my path because this was going to consume me, or I was going to continue my path. And, I just closed my eyes in meditation. Her face appeared to me, and I just remember this. No, I'm not going to quit. Somebody felt compassion for me, and that compassion, that understanding, that non-judgment made me believe in myself. It made me believe that, well, wait a second, this person's not judging me, they're not condemning me, and I believed in myself. Whereas when someone judges you or condemns you or thinks you're weak or a victim, it takes the belief away from you. And, like I don't know if you caught it, but I had mentioned that, not too long ago or a few years ago, I was stabbed several times, and I have a scar on my head, right? And I typically keep a shaved head. So every time I shave my head, I would nick that scar and blood would run down my face and I would feel sad, I'd feel the negative emotions of having been stabbed there. But after a while, it became like a badge of honor, and I realized that I had these scars, but I had survived, right? They healed. I survived it.
Right.
And, me and you talked about being Christ-like the other day. And some people say I have a Messiah complex, and I say, is that a bad thing? To have a Messiah complex is not a bad thing if it means that you're a healer, that you heal other people, and that you're willing to hug the lepers. And on the related topic of compassion, there was a time where, now I don't believe in medical doctors, but there was a time where my path had forced me into a hospital. And I was there for a few days, and there was a man in a wheelchair. If he would have stood up, he probably would have been two of me. I'm a very short guy. But he was in a wheelchair, and I could see the sadness in his eyes, and the nurses really didn't want to have anything to do with him, and they would push him in his room and not give him much human contact. And whenever he would come into the hallways, I would just see the sadness in his face. And intuitively, I knew that, one, he was a gay man. In the South, that can be difficult. And two, I kind of figured by how the medical staff was treating him that he probably had HIV or hepatitis, something like that.
Right.
And because of those things, not much human contact. People look at him as he's sick, same thing with addiction. But I remember one night, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, I was sitting on my bed and I was in meditation, and I have like a spidey sense. If you go through traumatic events, you get like a spidey sense. You can kind of sense when something is amiss or something is awry. And, I could feel a pull in the middle of my forehead. I knew something was wrong. And I didn't know what it was, but I knew that I had to get up and I had to go. And I ran down the hall and went into his room. And he was laying face first on the floor. The wheelchair was against the wall, and his foot was across the room. He had prosthetic legs. And I remember instantaneously picking him up and knowing that he probably had HIV. He was bleeding. And I sat him on his bed, and I grabbed his prosthetic foot and put it back on. And I remember standing up and I grabbed him by his hand, and I looked down at him, and I said, it's going to be okay, because he was in a humiliated position, and the nurses wouldn't help. And he just burst out into tears and put his head on my chest, and I just let him weep until the nurses came, and then they made me leave. And the next day, we were in the cafeteria, and he looked at me and he said, thank you so much for what you did. He said, but I haven't, because of my family's religion and things of that nature, I haven't had human contact in so long, I forgot what it felt like for somebody to touch me, right? And as I listened to his story, he had come from Florida, and they told him he had, and I might be backwards on this, but they told him that he had hepatitis C, so they gave him hepatitis B to get rid of it and whatever. But in the long and the short of it, they told him they had to amputate, I think, one of his toes, right? When he woke up, they amputated both of his legs. And he had prosthetic legs, and they put him in a wheelchair and said it'd be several years before he would be able to walk, right? And that day, I remember he got out of his wheelchair and started walking on his prosthetic legs. And the next day, I convinced the medical staff to let everybody on that wing out to get some sunshine. And I'm not lying to you. This guy on prosthetic legs got out of that chair and beat me in a game of basketball. Now, they told him it would be several years before he'd be even able to walk. And he beat me in a game of basketball. And the reason I tell that story is because that's the power of human compassion. That's what it can, feeling compassionate for another human being who is viewed as sick can make them do things like that.
Well, absolutely, and this is one of the things, and I told you this before, and I've said this several times. The fact that I don't, subscribe to the exact same belief system that you do, does not mean that I don't value it. And the fact is that whether you want to argue whether there was a historical Jesus, you call him Yeshua, and all of that, and you want to discuss it, the allegory and the lesson is sound. And I'm telling you now that if you do believe that this man existed, if you do believe that he walked the earth, if he were here today, he would not be among the crystal shining churches that you're looking at. He would not be on television. He would be down there with the people that are sick. He'd be hanging out with people who have the Ebola virus. He would be with the people that need him. Okay? And this is the problem, in my opinion, a lot of times, is that people try to ascribe to a dogmatic system as opposed to taking what I call an allegory, and utilizing it properly to be Christ-like. And this is where this comes into play. And this is the difference here. You see, what you did there was you practiced compassion. Compassion, empathy is two of the largest keys to being a human being. We are meant to interact with one another. We are meant to socialize. We are meant to connect. We are meant to, this is part of our nature, just like the need for food, water, and air. And this is necessary. Nothing will be healthy in the human system as a whole. Nothing will be right until we get back to these types of principles. And it's all contained there, whether you want to call it an allegory or you want to look at some other narrative, whether you want to look at religions that pre-existed Christianity, all the positive messages there about being kind to your fellow man, about charity, about the care of one another. This is what is really the key here, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm sorry to interrupt you there with that, but this is sort of what you were alluding to, and I'll make that statement a million times. I would like to see more Christians be less Christian and a whole lot more Christ-like. Right.
And ironically enough, and I don't find any coincidences in the universe, but when I was attacked, I had glass in my head and 5 wounds, and when the police took pictures, they actually made me put my arms in the form of a cross to take pictures. And so I can identify with the man Yeshua. Whether he was historical or not, it doesn't really matter. The characteristics of his personality that I've adopted into my own personality is what really matters, because even Christians will tell you the Holy Spirit is within you. The kingdom of heaven is within you. So be that be the Christ figure in somebody else's life. But that's just the way that I look at it, especially with addiction. Don't give up on them. But before I forget, people who are happen to be listening and who you want somebody to have that compassion. I'll tell you, sometimes you don't have anybody around, and I'll even go ahead and put myself out there. Look, if you're out there and you're struggling with it, and you don't have anybody to contact, you can contact me. I'll put everybody else to the side. If there's no one else that you can think of, find me on Facebook, Daniel Lewis Crumpton. If you need to just talk without judgment, I'm not too busy. I'll put everything to the side, and we have to be that way for each other. But, to be a shoulder for somebody, to be able to embrace them in that moment of weakness and darkness that they can come out of. You can lift somebody out of that and be a hero to them so they could be a hero to other people. And that's just the way that I look at it. It's not, addiction is not something that you have to stay stuck in and that will consume you. You can overcome it. It can be overcome with help, with friends, within yourself if you do the work. And before I forget, and then I'll, however else you want to take it in the last few minutes we have, is I would urge anybody who's going through this to look up on YouTube, write this down, a lecture by Manly P. Hall, and it's called Don't Let Your Past Destroy Your Future. He discusses a lot of issues that addicts have to deal with, which is regret about things they've done, things like that. But he also touches on substance abuse, and it's a life-changing lecture. An hour of your time will change your life and your perspective. It's called "Don't Let Your Past Destroy Your Future" by Manly P. Hall.
Right. Actually, I do believe I have looked at that, and this is not just, don't let the title throw you. There's a lot more to it. It's not just a matter of not letting your past dictate your future. Very much philosophically, like Daniel had said earlier, that the past and the future are not things that are within you. They're not within your control, because all you have is the present, and this is the truth of reality. This is what it comes down to, and this is where you can begin to take hold. Regardless of what your situation is, regardless of what your darkness is, there is always the possibility of you changing the situation, because the power is within you. And this is the type of message that I definitely wanted to give tonight. I wanted to let people know that there was, not necessarily, a complete self-help kind of thing here or anything by any means, but to just give you a hint that there are alternatives, especially if you're feeling trapped within a situation. Regardless of what that situation is, there is always a manageable way and a possibility, because the human creature, the spiritual living being, is a remarkable mechanism that is yours, and you are the greatest power in your universe. And this is something that you need to recognize, that you can change anything. I always say that, that simple drops of rain, if there are enough of them that fall in the ocean, the tides will swell differently. And this is the way it goes. You can be a drop of rain, and you can wind up changing that tide, and you have no idea if you influence even one person. You have no idea the effect they may have.
That's right.
And this is something that I always say that, this is why we have to have these types of discussions sometimes. And, again, sorry to those who think that this has nothing to do with liberty, but I believe that freedom very much begins with what you can reach with your own two hands as well. And you can reach yourself, can't you?
Mm. This is true. One of the other aspects of addiction is, a lot of the manufactured drugs that are on the street are put out there by the government, and so you want to talk about freedom and liberty. Look at the CIA bringing in all this heroin from Afghanistan. They're doing that for a reason. It's to shut down your pineal gland, your third eye, so that you can't transcend the materialistic aspect of liberty. There's a spiritual aspect to the fight for freedom and liberty, and if you don't connect the two, you're not going to get anywhere. The Founding Fathers were deeply spiritual men. Now, they believed in divine providence, so anybody who happens to be in the liberty movement that thinks that this is irrelevant, you got another thing coming. It's very, very relevant. The Founding Fathers depended on that divine providence that led their intuition, and if you are shut down with drugs and alcohol or any other addiction, then you're not going to even hear that divine providence, and you're never going to see a revolution in your own life or in this country. Like I said earlier, you can't have brush fires in the minds of men if all the wood is wet in the minds of men.
Absolutely, Daniel, and I couldn't have said it better myself. Of course, you seem to pull things together so eloquently, and I'm so glad. And I want to thank you again for taking this time and having the courage. And in fact, you encouraged me to even speak out a bit because I haven't really felt the need to share certain aspects which I shared tonight with my listeners before, but I thought it was necessary. To not just simply have you standing there alone saying these things. I wanted to join your voice, sir, and let people know that there are many different ways. I don't have the well-rounded solutions in a lot of cases that Daniel has been talking about, and quite honestly, I don't wish to advise anyone else personally on this matter because it is still a struggle in my mind. It is still a struggle for me, and I haven't quite got my hands completely around it. I mean, I am completely clean at the moment, and have been for some time, but it is not, it is not something that I think I have beaten at all. I just want that made clear, and I do hope that. That what Daniel's talked about, definitely find him on Facebook. Even if you don't have a problem, man, he's definitely a really interesting guy. And the Digital Hourglass also gave me a little banner via you too, right? And
yeah.
I forgot to mention that at the top of the show because of the technical problems, but I really like that. I got that on my Facebook page right now, and that's some really cool stuff. And that has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I just wanted to make sure I got it in because we are down to the last 5 minutes or so here, Daniel. And if there's anything else that you want to add, sir, the floor is absolutely yours.
All right, I'm gonna actually, after I get off the show, I'm going to be packing my bags and headed to Alabama, and then I'll be in Nashville, Tennessee for 2 days. But on Tuesday, I do want to go ahead and let people know who are listening. I'm going to be joining Eric Bell on For Whom the Bell Tolls on freedomizerradio.com at 6. We're going to be talking about my novel for the first 30 minutes, and then spirituality with Derek Brose from Adam versus the Man. So I would include, everybody who's listening tonight to tune in Tuesday to For Whom the Bell Tolls on Freedomizer Radio, and go to his Facebook page as well. He's a great guy. He's one of my friends, and he's an excellent radio show host who looks at things in a different perspective. Also, go to Jason Patrick's The Fight for Freedom Never Sleeps on Facebook and give the man a donation because he's out there doing some stuff for the liberty movement that nobody else is willing to do, it seems. If you could, go to ZenonTheCar.com and there's a donate button up at the top. Every penny helps, every dollar helps. It takes money to run the website. It takes money to put gas in our cars and to do what we do over there at ZenonTheCar.com. So we would appreciate donations there. I would ask you to check out Sabrina Black's blog, which is divineamerica@blogspot.com. She's a prolific writer. She's got some very, very interesting concepts that she covers too, and we're happy to have her. Other than that, please get a copy of my novel. Find me on Facebook. I'm very approachable. Send me a message. Tell me you heard me on the Ochelli Effect or whatever show. And if you're somebody who is struggling with addiction, if you just need somebody to talk and you see my green dot on, do not hesitate. I will put everything to the side just to be there for you. And I know that there are a lot of other people who would too. But other than that, I would just say, take it one day at a time and be the superhero or the messiah figure in your own life and the other lives, because this is not something that has to consume your life. There's more to it.
Right.
And I want to thank you for having me on to discuss this topic. I really, really do, Chuck. I appreciate it. And I think that you're a brave man for coming out tonight and saying what you said. And I think you have beaten it. I think that tonight you probably put it in the grave.
You know what? I don't often say things like this, but from your mouth to God's ears, sir, because I never, ever want to re-enter that cycle. And before we do close out, I just want to remind everybody that, of course, UCY.tv also has a donate button. You can check that out. There's plenty of other hosts on this network who do amazing work as well. If you're checking this out further downstream, that's ucy.tv. And if you go to /TOE, regardless of whether I'm on, there are archives there. This show's a little bit broken up because we had a couple of technical issues, but generally I don't have so many. And there is just a lot of cool stuff that's coming up on UCY. Please keep an eye on it. There's a chat room there, which crosses over. If you go to my page, you'll be listening to whatever host happens to be on, and the chat room runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there's plenty of different ways for you to connect out there. There is, various internet sources. I do post my archives to the SoundCloud, which nobody's really visiting, but thanks anyway. You can find me, Chuck Ochelli, on Facebook, or The Ochelli Effect on Facebook as well. Thank you for listening. Please stay tuned for After the Last Cup and UCY.TV Radio.
At the age of 19 in 1962, she was
See, but I have the files. I read this stuff at the National Archives, and I read these other things. I said to myself, how can that be possible? The brain, pistols and fondle slab of choice. I don't know computers, internet, professional wrestlers, and not just Ventura style. It doesn't matter where the cartoon comes from as long as it's real. It's hard to get real information because seriously,